both of you seem like very thoughtful, self-reflective educators who are bringing a lot of yourself and also trying to figure out who your students are and how to connect with them. So it's important to think about who you are and where you're coming from. But I am curious about kind of external trends as well. So as much as you want to be true to yourself, I'm curious what some trends in the practice of teaching and learning that are happening right now in higher education. What are things that higher education needs to consider? Jeannette, I'll ask you this question, in terms of what can higher education do to either embrace certain trends that you see coming down the pipes or to think more critically about them? What are your thoughts on trends in higher education in teaching and learning?
There is a trend right now, I think, around this whole discussion of alternate grading and how does that fit and where does it fit? And I think the pandemic has sort of given us all time to sort of stop and reflect about how we teach and why we teach, and realizing that traditional grading is not the best way. There's a lot of bad things that happen when we grade traditionally, and it's not necessarily encouraging students to learn. And this alternate grading trend, I guess, if we want to call it that, is happening. And for me, now that I'm starting to use alternate grading in most of my courses, I will never go back to traditional grading. There's a ton of problems with alternate grading about how do we actually incorporate it into our current university system. And I think that's a big challenge that we have to solve. I don't know how we get from where we are to being more alternate grading. I'm hoping those are some discussions that are going to happen in the conference. I think it's going to be interesting to have some of those conversations. So as far as a trend, I mean, that is one that I would like to see take over. Really, I think we would have happier and healthier students and happier and healthier faculty, because it's a pleasure to alternate grade and not have to focus on grades. So yeah, I'll leave it at alternate grading and turn things over to Awneet, who may have her finger closer to the pulse of some other trends that may be happening.
Okay, so Awneet, yeah, we'll let you have the floor in terms of what do you see happening that we either need to embrace or that we need to think more critically about.
Yeah, thank you. I think Jeannette's absolutely on the pulse of a big trend. And I would say under the umbrella of assessment in general, we've seen the impact of AI on changing how faculty assess and what they assess, and the use of AI in assessment. So I think assessment generally is moving in a very interesting and exciting direction, and it's going to take some structural change to support those changes. And incidentally, Jeannette, I've worked in an ungrading program for decades. Most teacher education programs, at least in BC, are ungraded. And the quality of the work and the quality of the exponential, I would say, transformative growth that students experience in those environments is directly correlated to the fact that they don't have to worry about the grade. They worry about the learning. And so that just becomes this, really beautiful experience for faculty, and happy students live in happy faculty classrooms. So I'm with you on that. I think another trend that I'm hoping to see more of, and we've just gone through a process of revising our institutional learning outcomes to hopefully better reflect this. And that is the emphasis on the development of competencies. There's, the decade of learn what you need to learn and also learn how to apply it has now precipitated into, and I think evolved into a real general trend that we need to have students who are competent in terms of their skills, attitudes, dispositions, their ability to use the knowledge for good, and to understand how to develop some agency around what it is they know. I often say to students, well, now that you know that, what are you going to do with that knowledge? And why are you going to choose that to do? So thinking about from an equity and decolonizing and indigenizing lens, how is the knowledge that you're learning and the competencies and capacities that you're building going to change the status quo for those who it's not working for? So I think that's a general movement around, social innovation as well. Taking what you learn from a 4-year degree, 3-year degree, 2-year diploma, master's degree, a journey in post-secondary to become and to know. So part of that becoming is knowing that you have some agency to do something with what you've learned. And of course, I think the other big trend is how to not be in the sort of reacting to online teaching in the pandemic phase to post-pandemic innovation. I keep saying our starting point is so much higher. Everyone had to go online. So how can we push that practice forward? How can we start to think really innovatively about embedding strategies, approaches, and structures to create those learning spaces that many of us are able to do in the face-to-face classroom? How can we create that and support that, particularly from a teaching and learning center lens with faculty that are teaching primarily online or in hybrid formats? So there's lots of exciting trends, and I appreciate your comment, Janna, about the being critical minded about it as well. I think digital literacy and critical digital literacy is a big part of knowing what to choose and what knowledge counts and for who. So I think there's lots of exciting things happening in higher education. It's a great time. We're in a new century.